The autumn rain pelted against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Whitmore Industries' 42nd floor office, creating shimmering rivulets that smeared the glittering Chicago skyline into a watercolor of blurred lights. Richard Whitmore sat motionless in his custom wheelchair, his steely gray eyes fixed on the quarterly report scattered across his vast mahogany desk. At 55, he commanded a business empire worth $3 billion. Yet the numbers before him might as well have been written in a foreign language. His empire felt like a gilded cage. His mind wasn't on profit margins or market projections. It was on the email he'd received that morning. A crisp, digital nail in the coffin of his hope. It was another rejection. This time from an experimental treatment center in Switzerland. We regret to inform you that you are not a candidate for our spinal cord regeneration program. The same cold, formal words he'd seen from 17 different facilities over the past 3 years. Mr. Whitmore. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Sharp and unwelcome. Your physical therapist is here. Send him away. Richard growled, not looking up from his papers. Cancel everything for today. Despite his instructions, the heavy oak doors burst open. Marcus Webb, his therapist for 3 long years, strode in with his usual infuriatingly determined expression. That's not happening. Richard, Marcus said, his voice firm. You've missed 4 sessions this month. I said cancel. You can fire me if you want. Marcus shot back, moving behind the wheelchair. But I'm not going to stand by and watch you give up. We're going to the gym. Don't you dare touch. But Marcus was already pushing the chair toward the door. Richard's hands shot to the wheels, his knuckles white as he tried to resist. But Marcus was stronger and, in that moment, far more determined. Let go of me. Richard's voice echoed through the marble hallway as they passed startled employees, who quickly averted their eyes. I'll have security throw you out. Good luck with that. Marcus replied, his jaw set, continuing to push despite Richard's protests. They were halfway to the elevator when it happened. A small voice, as clear as a crystal bell, cut through Richard's angry shouts. Excuse me, mister. I can make Daddy walk again. Both men froze. Standing beside the polished reception desk was a little girl, no more than 9 years old. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her worn sneakers squeaked softly against the floor. She wore a faded blue dress that had clearly been mended several times, and she clutched a small brown paper bag that smelled faintly of cleaning supplies. A hush fell over the sprawling lobby. The gentle hum of commerce ceased. Phones were lowered mid-conversation. All eyes turned toward the small girl who stood with an air of quiet confidence. What did you say? Richard's voice came out as barely a whisper. The anger in him instantly extinguished and replaced by a profound, bewildering shock. The girl stepped forward. Her green eyes so familiar. So achingly familiar, meeting his with unwavering certainty. I said, I can make you walk again. Daddy. The word hit Richard like a physical blow. His face drained of all color, and his hands began to tremble on the wheelchair's armrests. Daddy? He repeated, his voice cracking. The word was an echo from a life he'd never lived. A ghost in the machine of his existence. Mama told me all about you. The girl continued, seemingly unaware of the earthquake she'd just triggered. She said you were the smartest, Kindest man she ever knew. And she said that when I got big enough, I should come find you and tell you who I am. Marcus released his grip on the wheelchair, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Your mother. Richard managed to stammer. What's her name? Sarah Collins. She cleans offices here at night. The girl reached into her paper bag and pulled out a crumpled photograph. She gave me this to show you. With hands that trembled uncontrollably, Richard took the photo. It showed a woman he hadn't seen in 10 years. Sarah. Beautiful Sarah. With her bright smile and determined eyes. She was holding a baby. A baby with the same piercing green eyes that now stared up at him from across the lobby. Emma. Richard whispered, reading the name written in faded ink on the back of the photo. Your name is Emma. The photograph trembled in his hands as he stared at the little girl before him, Emma Collins. His daughter. The word seemed impossible. Yet the evidence stood right there. Her eyes a perfect mirror of his own. Denial was futile. How did you get in here? Marcus whispered, finally finding his voice. Mama brings me sometimes when she works late. Emma replied matter-of-factly. I know all the security guards. Mr. Peterson gave me a juice box last week. Richard's mind raced back 10 years. Sarah Collins. A brief but intense relationship that had ended when his business consumed his entire world. She had tried to tell him something important before she left. But he'd been too focused on a crucial merger to listen. The regret that had haunted him for a decade suddenly took on a devastating, life-altering dimension. Where is your mother now? Richard's voice cracked with an urgency that startled even himself. At the hospital, Emma said, her small shoulders sagging. She's been sick for 3 weeks. The doctors say she needs an operation. But we don't have enough money. The words hit Richard like a sledgehammer. While he'd been wallowing in self-pity over his paralyzed legs, his daughter had been watching her mother waste away because they couldn't afford medical care. What kind of operation? He asked, his voice tight. Something about her heart. The doctor used big words I didn't understand. Emma's voice grew smaller. But Mama said if I found you and told you the special thing, maybe you could help. The special thing? Emma nodded seriously. She said you were hurt real bad and that God gave me a gift to help people. She said I should tell you that love makes miracles happen. But only if you believe. The lobby had become a theater of stunned silence. Employees pretended to work. But every ear was tuned to the unfolding drama. Marcus knelt beside Richard's chair, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. Emma, Richard said gently, his voice thick with emotion. How exactly do you think you can make me walk? The little girl stepped closer, her small hand reaching toward his. Mama taught me. She said when two people love each other enough, and when someone believes real hard, God helps fix what's broken. But first, you have to want to be fixed. For the first time in 3 years, Richard felt something stir in the frozen landscape of his chest. It wasn't quite hope. But it was something warmer. Something more alive than the cold emptiness that had consumed him. Would you like to see your mama? He asked, his voice soft. Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. Could we? Really? Richard turned to Marcus, his eyes conveying a command that needed no words. Cancel everything. We're going to Chicago General. The sterile corridors of Chicago General Hospital echoed with the soft squeak of Richard's wheelchair as Emma skipped alongside him, her small hand resting trustingly on his armrest. Marcus followed a few steps behind, his mind still reeling from the morning's revelations. "She's in room 312. Emma announced, her voice a mixture of excitement and worry. "The nurses are really nice. But they whisper a lot when they think I'm not listening." Richard's heart hammered against his ribs. 10 years. 10 years since he'd seen Sarah. And now he was about to find her fighting for her life while he had been drowning in his own problems. The elevator ride felt eternal. When the doors finally opened on the 3rd floor, Emma pulled him toward the cardiac wing. Her familiarity with the hospital's layout a painful testament to how much time she'd spent there. "There." Emma pointed to a partially open door. "That's Mama's room." Through the gap, Richard could see a figure lying motionless in the hospital bed, connected to monitors that beeped in a steady, rhythmic cadence. Sarah. Beautiful Sarah. Looked so fragile. So different from the vibrant woman he remembered. "Mama's sleeping a lot now," Emma whispered. "But sometimes she wakes up and tells me stories about you." Richard steeled himself and pushed through the doorway. Sarah's eyes were closed, her face pale against the white pillows. She'd lost weight, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. But she was still the same woman who had captivated him all those years ago. "Sarah," he said softly. Her eyelids fluttered open. For a moment, confusion clouded her features. Then, recognition dawned, followed quickly by shock. "Richard?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Oh my God. Emma. What did you do?" "I told him about the special thing. Just like you said," Emma replied proudly, climbing onto the chair beside the bed. "And I told him he's my daddy." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked between her daughter and the man she hadn't seen in a decade. "I never meant. I just thought you were too busy to care." "I was an idiot," Richard said simply, his voice thick with regret. "Sarah. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you make me listen? You were building your empire. I was just a distraction." Sarah struggled to sit up. "But when I found out I was pregnant, I tried to reach you. Your secretary kept saying you were in important meetings for weeks." The memory came flooding back, his assistant fielding calls from a frantic Sarah while he was consumed by the Peterson acquisition. He'd told her to handle it, never imagining what he was brushing aside. "I would have married you," he said quietly. "I would have given up everything. I know that now," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. "But I was young and proud. I thought I could raise her on my own. I wanted to give her the world. But I can barely give her anything." Emma suddenly perked up, looking between her parents with bright, hopeful eyes. "But now Daddy's here. I can make him walk again. And then he can help take care of you. And we can be a real family." The innocence in her voice was both heartbreaking and beautiful. Richard reached out and took Sarah's hand, feeling how cold and fragile it was. "What do the doctors say?" he asked. Sarah's eyes clouded with fear. "Mitral valve replacement. Without it." She glanced at Emma, unable to finish the sentence in front of their daughter. "Consider it done," Richard said firmly, a wave of purpose washing over him. "Whatever it costs. Whoever we need to fly in." It's done. 2 days later. Richard found himself in the hospital's family lounge at 6 a.m. Watching Emma color in a Disney princess book while they waited for Sarah's surgery to begin. He had arranged for the finest cardiac surgeon on the East Coast to be flown in. But the waiting was still excruciating. "Daddy," Emma said suddenly, not looking up from her coloring. "You haven't tried to walk yet." Richard shifted uncomfortably in his wheelchair. "Emma. Sweetheart. It's not that simple. The doctors have run every test imaginable. My spinal cord was severely damaged in the car accident. But did you ask God to help?" Her crayon paused mid-stroke. Well. I haven't prayed in a very long time." Emma set down her crayon and climbed into his lap. An act that surprised him with how natural and right it felt. "Mama says God hears all our prayers. Even the quiet ones we think in our heads. And she says sometimes he waits for the right moment to answer them." Richard wrapped his arms around his daughter, marveling at how perfectly she fit against his chest. "What do you think the right moment is?" "When someone needs you to be strong for them," Emma said with simple conviction. "Like right now. Mama needs you to be strong. And I need you to be strong. So maybe now is when God will help you walk." The logic was so pure, so unshakable, that Richard found himself considering possibilities he'd long since abandoned. "Even if I could walk again, Emma, it would take a lot of time. A lot of therapy. A lot of hard work." "That's okay," she said, snuggling closer. "I'm good at waiting. And Mr. Marcus can help. Right?" Marcus, who had been dozing in a nearby chair, opened his eyes. "Help with what?" "Making Daddy walk again," Emma announced confidently. Marcus sat up straighter, studying Richard's face. In the past 2 days, he'd seen more light in Richard's eyes than in the previous 3 years combined. "You know what, Emma? I think you might be onto something." "You do?" Richard looked at his therapist, surprised. "I've been your therapist for 3 years. Richard. I've watched you go through the motions without any real hope or drive." Marcus paused thoughtfully. "But since Emma walked into your life, the mind is more powerful than we give it credit for. Maybe what you needed wasn't another experimental treatment. Maybe you just needed a reason to fight." Emma clapped her hands together. "See? I told you." Dar. Patricia Williams, Sarah's surgeon, appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Whitmore, we're ready to begin. The procedure should take about 4 hours." Richard felt Emma tense in his arms. "Is Mama going to be okay?" she asked in a small voice. Dar. Williams smiled kindly. "I'm going to take very good care of her. And when she wakes up, she's going to have a brand new heart valve that will make her feel much better." As they wheeled Sarah toward the operating room, she reached out and squeezed Richard's hand. "Take care of our miracle," she whispered. Emma waved until her mother disappeared around the corner, then turned to Richard with determined eyes. "Now we wait. And now we work. Mr. Marcus. Can you help Daddy try to stand up?" Marcus looked at Richard, a question in his eyes. Richard took a deep breath, feeling a surge of something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine hope, mixed with a desperate, powerful love for the two people who needed him most. Let's try, he said quietly. The physical therapy room on the hospital's rehabilitation floor was empty except for the three of them. Richard's hands gripped the parallel bars so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Remember, Marcus said quietly. We're not looking for miracles today. We're just looking for any sensation. Any response at all. Emma sat cross-legged on a nearby mat. Her hands clasped. I'm praying real hard. Daddy. I can feel it working. Richard closed his eyes, concentrating with every fiber of his being. For 3 years, he had approached therapy with resigned desperation. Today was different. Today, he was trying to walk for his daughter. For the woman fighting for her life 3 floors above. Focus on your left leg first, Marcus instructed. Don't try to move it. Just try to feel it. For several long minutes, there was nothing but silence and the scent of antiseptic. Then, something extraordinary occurred. A flicker. A ghost of a sensation in his left thigh. Like the faint prickle of pins and needles returning to a sleeping limb. His eyes snapped open. Marcus. He whispered urgently. I felt something. Where? My left leg. It was like pins and needles. Marcus knelt and gently pressed against Richard's thigh muscle. Can you feel this? Richard concentrated intensely. Yes. It's faint. But. Yes. Emma jumped up excitedly. It's working. I knew it would work. Easy. Sweetheart. Marcus cautioned, though his own voice was filled with amazement. This is just the beginning. Richard. Try to send a signal down to your leg. Just try to activate the muscle. Richard gripped the bars, concentrating harder than he ever had on any business deal. He thought of Emma's trusting eyes. Of Sarah on the operating table. Of all the moments he'd missed and all the moments he prayed he would have. Suddenly, he felt a slight, involuntary contraction in his left quadriceps. Marcus gasped. Richard. Do that again. Did I do something? Your quad muscle just fired. It was small. But it definitely fired. For the next hour, they worked methodically. And Richard managed to activate several other muscle groups. It wasn't movement. Not yet. But it was a connection. It was proof that somewhere, deep inside, the path was not entirely broken. By the end of the session, he was exhausted but exhilarated. This is incredible, Marcus said, staring at his notes in disbelief. In 3 years, we've never had a response like this. It's like something has woken up your entire nervous system. Emma climbed onto Richard's lap as he sat in his wheelchair, catching his breath. I told you, Daddy. Love makes miracles happen. Just then, a nurse appeared in the doorway. Mr. Whitmore. Dar. Williams would like to see you. The surgery is complete. Richard's heart stopped. Is she? You'll need to speak with the doctor, the nurse said diplomatically. The elevator ride felt like an eternity. When they reached the waiting area, Dar. Williams was standing there with an unreadable expression. How is she? Richard asked, his voice raw. Dar. Williams broke into a brilliant, genuine smile. The surgery was a complete success. Sarah is going to be fine. Better than fine. Actually. Once she recovers, she'll have better heart function than she's had in years. Emma let out a whoop of joy that echoed through the quiet hallway. They found Sarah in her room. Groggy from the anesthesia but awake. When she saw them, however, her eyes cleared with a new light. "Guess what, Mama?" Emma said, climbing carefully onto the bed. "Daddy's legs are starting to work again." The doctor saw it happen. Sarah's eyes widened as she looked at Richard. A question in her gaze. "It's early," Richard said cautiously. But a smile touched his lips. "But yes. For the first time in 3 years, I had a genuine muscle response." Tears of joy streamed down Sarah's face. "Emma, you said this would happen." "I told you," Emma said matter-of-factly. "God was just waiting for the right time. When Daddy found out he had people who needed him to be strong, that's when the miracle could happen." But as the new family celebrated their twin triumphs, none of them noticed the figure standing in the hallway. A woman in an expensive suit, holding a legal portfolio and watching the reunion with cold, calculating eyes. Margaret Whitmore's perfectly manicured nails drummed against the leather portfolio as she observed the touching scene. At 62, Richard's stepmother had spent the last 15 years embedding herself in Whitmore Industries, positioning herself as the power behind the throne, especially during Richard's darkest moments. The sight of Richard laughing with this woman and child threatened everything she had meticulously built. Mrs. Whitmore, her assistant, Peter Dalton, approached quietly. "I've completed the background check you requested." Margaret stepped away from the window, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor. "Tell me." Sarah Collins, age 34. Single mother. Works 3 cleaning jobs to make ends meet. No criminal record. No significant debt except for recent medical bills. The child, Emma Collins, age 9. Born approximately 10 months after Richard's last known contact with the mother. No DNA test on record. But the timing and physical resemblance are compelling. Margaret's jaw tightened. When Richard's father died, he'd left her a substantial fortune. But the controlling interest in the company had gone to Richard. His depression and withdrawal had been the perfect cover for her to consolidate power. Now this. He's authorized a heart surgery that cost nearly $200,000. Peter continued. And has been making calls about restarting experimental spinal cord treatments. The physical therapist is calling in favors with top neurological specialists. Word is spreading about his sudden improvement. Improvement? Margaret's voice was ice. According to my source, he showed significant muscle response today. After 3 years of nothing. Margaret stared through the window again at the perfect little family picture. A picture that represented an enormous threat to her ambitions. "Peter," she commanded, "I want you to research every angle. Employment records. Medical histories. Everything. I want to know about any legal vulnerabilities. From a legal standpoint. What are his obligations to an unacknowledged child?" Peter's expression grew uncomfortable. "Ma'am. Are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we need to understand all our options." Margaret's smile was as sharp as a blade. Richard is clearly not thinking straight. He's making impulsive, emotional decisions. One might even argue his judgment is compromised. Inside the room, Emma suddenly looked toward the window, her bright green eyes seeming to lock directly onto Margaret. For a moment, her expression was unnaturally serious, as if she could sense the threat lurking just outside their newfound happiness. "Daddy," Emma said quietly, "I think someone doesn't want our family to be together." Richard followed her gaze. But Margaret had already stepped away. In the hallway, she made her decision. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she'd hoped never to use. "Hello. Jonathan. It's Margaret Whitmore. I need to discuss Richard's mental competency and his recent erratic behavior." "Yes. A formal evaluation. Can you be in Chicago tomorrow?" As she hung up, Margaret smiled coldly. The war for Whitmore Industries was about to begin, and she intended to win, no matter the collateral damage. Dar. Jonathan Winters, a psychiatrist whose loyalty was to money, not medicine, reviewed the evaluation request in Margaret's downtown office. "You're asking me to declare Richard mentally incompetent based on what?" "Exactly. Erratic financial decisions, emotional instability, and delusional thinking." Margaret paced like a caged predator. "He's spending hundreds of thousands on strangers. Jonathan. He's convinced a child can perform miracles. An unverified paternity claim from a woman who disappeared for 10 years. Margaret's voice dripped disdain. "I've dedicated my life to that company. I won't watch it destroyed by a gold-digging single mother and her manipulative child." Meanwhile, at the hospital, Richard was doing the impossible. For the first time in 3 years, he was standing upright between the parallel bars, bearing his own weight. "Look, Daddy. You're standing like a real daddy," Emma exclaimed. Marcus watched in amazement as Richard took a trembling half-step. "This is incredible. Richard. Your muscle response has improved exponentially." "It doesn't feel real," Richard admitted, sweat pouring down his face. "That's because you now have something to fight for," Sarah said softly from her wheelchair, her own strength returning day by day. Their moment of triumph was shattered by a man in a cheap suit. "Mr. Whitmore. I'm a process server. You're being served." Richard's blood ran cold as he took the papers. "Petition for mental competency evaluation." He read aloud. "Filed by Margaret Whitmore." Sarah gasped. "Can she do that?" "Unfortunately. Yes," Richard said grimly, sinking back into his wheelchair. "If a court agrees I'm incompetent, Margaret could gain control of everything. My finances, my medical decisions, even my parental rights." The court-appointed psychiatrist's office felt like a tomb. Dar. Helena Rodriguez was sharp and clinical. "Mr. Whitmore. Tell me about your belief that this child can help you walk again." Richard chose his words carefully. "Emma has given me a hope and a motivation I haven't had in years. My physical progress has been remarkable since she entered my life. But do you believe she has supernatural healing powers?" "I believe that love and faith can accomplish things that medicine alone cannot," Richard stated, his gaze steady. The evaluation was a grueling 2 hours. That night, in Sarah's hospital room, she made a painful confession. "The night before I left, 10 years ago, she whispered. Tears in her eyes. I tried to tell you I was pregnant. You were on that important phone call about the Peterson merger. You held up your hand to stop me from talking. When you finally hung up, you said you were too exhausted. I was so hurt. So angry. I just left. The weight of that single, thoughtless gesture hit Richard like a physical blow. A decade of their lives lost. His daughter growing up without him. All because he hadn't listened. We can't change the past, Sarah, he said, squeezing her hand. But I promise you, I will not let anyone take our family away from us now. Emma's laughter echoed through the therapy room as Richard took 3 consecutive steps without any support. It was a monumental achievement. Daddy, you're really walking. Their joy was interrupted by Richard's lawyer, James Morrison, who burst in, his face grim. Richard, we have a problem. Dar. Rodriguez has filed her report. She's recommending a full competency hearing. The court has scheduled it for Monday. What does that mean? Sarah paled. It means Margaret gets her day in court to prove Richard is mentally unfit. James explained. And there's more. Her team is going to argue that you're a gold digger who coached Emma to manipulate him. That's ridiculous. Sarah protested. Richard, I have to ask. James said seriously. Do you have any proof that Emma is your daughter? A DNA test? The birth certificate lists father unknown. Sarah admitted quietly. I was trying to protect you. Then we need a DNA test. Immediately. The DNA test results arrived on Friday morning. 2 days before the hearing. Richard tore open the envelope with trembling hands. 99.9% probability of paternity. He read aloud. His voice thick with emotion. Emma. You are officially, legally, my daughter. Their celebration was cut short by the arrival of Peter Dalton, Margaret's assistant, carrying an envelope. Inside were surveillance photos of them, along with a financial report detailing Sarah's every hardship. At the bottom was a typed note, convenient timing for her to remember Mr. Whitmore about his daughter. There's more, Peter said, his voice laced with regret. Mrs. Whitmore has filed an emergency petition for temporary custody of Emma, arguing her welfare is at risk. The hearing is tomorrow. Before Richard could process the new horror, Peter delivered the final blow. She also wanted me to convey a message. If you voluntarily sign over a 51% controlling interest in Whitmore Industries to her, she'll drop all legal proceedings. The ultimatum hung in the air, his company or his daughter. Richard looked at Emma. At her brave, trusting face. And a cold fury crystallized inside him. Margaret thought she could use his love as a weapon against him. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Peter, Richard said, his voice quiet but carrying a dangerous edge. You tell Margaret she can go to hell. I'm not giving up anything. Judge Patricia Hawthorne's courtroom was packed for the emergency custody hearing. Margaret's lawyer, a shark named Robert Sterling, painted Richard as a delusional man being manipulated by a desperate woman and her coached child. Then, the judge called Emma to the stand. She looked impossibly small in the witness chair. But her green eyes were clear and unafraid. Emma, the judge said gently, Did your mother tell you that if you convinced Mr. Whitmore you could heal him, he would give you money? Emma's eyes flashed. My mama never asked for any money. She just wanted Daddy to know about me before. Her voice became a tiny whisper. Before she died. The doctors said her heart was broken. I just wanted to meet my daddy before I didn't have a mama anymore. The courtroom was dead silent. When it was Richard's turn, he spoke with absolute conviction. Your Honor. 3 weeks ago, I was a broken man. Then my daughter walked into my life and gave me a reason to fight. He gripped the arms of his wheelchair and, with a monumental effort, rose to his feet. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. He stood there, trembling but undeniably standing. I'm not walking because of magic, Richard said, his voice growing stronger. I'm standing here because for the first time in 3 years, I have something worth standing for. He slowly lowered himself back into his chair, exhausted but triumphant. Emergency custody petition denied. Judge Hawthorne declared, her voice firm. Court adjourned. The morning of the competency hearing was gray and ominous. The stakes were higher than ever. In court, Sterling presented Margaret's case, using edited recordings and twisted financial documents to paint Richard as reckless and unstable. When it was Richard's turn to speak, he rose from his wheelchair again. Your Honor, you should be seated, the judge advised. Your Honor, I've been seated for 3 years, Richard replied. I'd prefer to stand. He took a deep breath. 3 weeks ago, my doctors and experts told me I would never walk again. They said it was impossible. His voice grew stronger. Then my daughter walked into my life. Not with magic, but with something more powerful, faith. Faith that love could accomplish what medicine couldn't. Faith that her father was someone worth believing in. He let go of the rail and took a step. Then another. He walked slowly but steadily across the courtroom. Each footstep a thunderclap in the silent room. I'm not walking because Emma waved a magic wand. I'm walking because she gave me a purpose bigger than my own pain. She reminded me that I have responsibilities to her. To her mother. And to the thousands of people who work for my company. He stopped directly in front of the judge, standing tall and unsupported. Margaret Whitmore claims I'm incompetent because I prioritized love over profit. She says I'm dangerous because I believe a child's faith can inspire miracles. Your Honor, I plead guilty to all of it. I am guilty of believing that love is more powerful than fear. And if that makes me incompetent, then I accept the judgment. He walked back to his table, each step more confident than the last. Emma ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. Judge Hawthorne had tears in her eyes. Mr. Whitmore, I have never seen anything quite like this. Love, faith, and determination are not symptoms of mental illness. They are signs of the highest form of mental health. Her gavel rang out like a bell. Petition denied. Case dismissed. The courtroom erupted in cheers. But as they celebrated, Margaret slipped out and made a call. Initiate the backup plan. She hissed. If I can't have the company, no one can. Moments later, Richard's phone buzzed. An emergency alert, fire alarm. Whitmore Industries. Evacuate immediately. Arson. The fire had started on multiple floors simultaneously. At the scene, the fire chief told him 12 employees were trapped on the 38th floor, beyond the reach of the ladder trucks. Without hesitation, Richard moved. "I know the building," he told Sarah. "There's a service elevator on an independent power system. I have to try." He ignored the screaming pain in his recovering legs as he navigated the smoky corridors, driven by a new, unshakable purpose. He reached the electrical panel and rerouted the power. The service elevator hummed to life. He made 2 trips, bringing his terrified employees to safety, staying with the last group himself. As they reached the ground floor, a section of the upper floors collapsed in a shower of sparks. He had saved them all. Outside, soot-covered and exhausted, Richard emerged a hero. Margaret was arrested trying to flee the city, her scheme to collect insurance money exposed. 1 year later, Richard stood in the sun-drenched garden of his new home, watching Sarah walk toward him in a beautiful white dress. Emma, serving as both flower girl and ring bearer, beamed with a joy so pure it felt like its own source of light. He looked out at their friends, family, and the many employees he had rescued from the fire. When it was his turn to speak, he took Sarah's hand, and Emma ran up to hold his other one. "A year ago," he began, his voice clear and strong, "I was a man who believed in balance sheets, but not in blessings. I thought miracles were fairy tales and that love was a luxury I couldn't afford. I believed some damage was too great to ever heal." His eyes met Emma's. "I was wrong. Miracles are real. They aren't magic spells. They are the moments when people who love each other refuse to give up. Love isn't a luxury. It's the most powerful and practical force in the universe. And no damage is so great that it can't be healed when you find your reason to fight." He looked at Sarah, then back at the crowd. "The little girl in the worn blue dress who walked into my office didn't just make her daddy walk again. She taught him how to live again, how to love again, and how to believe in the extraordinary power of an ordinary family." Emma squeezed his hand and whispered, "I love you, Daddy." Richard smiled. A genuine, soul-deep smile. He knew with absolute certainty that no matter what challenges the future might bring, they would face them together. Because that's what families do. And that's where the real miracles always begin. If you were moved by Richard and Emma's incredible journey of hope and redemption, please let us know in the comments below. Stories like these remind us of the power of faith and family. For more heartwarming and inspiring content, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to keep sharing stories that matter. Thank you for watching.